So we all watched The Many Saints of Newark. I will say out of Felix, Matt, and myself, I liked the movie the most. And by liked it the most, I thought it was pretty bad.
I mean, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, I feel like it was bad, and I didn't mind that it was that bad because it was, I don't know, just reliving dumb Sopranos crap. As a movie, yeah, not great.
I mean, I'm surprised by people who thought like, oh, this is going to be good. A Sopranos prequel.
A Sopranos story.
I would like to meet the people who went to see it in the theater. I would like to have a conversation with them. That's for sure.
I think I know how this movie came to be. So HBO Max was like, hey, we're starting a version of HBO that's bad. we're starting a version of HBO that's like an unself-aware CW. And we're going to make a bunch of shows like that. And it will also be the only way to see movies like Wonder Woman 1984, The Animal Farm. And we need another thing that sucks. We need something that like the scene transitions literally every 30 seconds, but the movie is still somehow too long. We need to never build up anything interesting about the characters. You just flat out tell us everything that's going on with the characters in the clumsiest way possible, like you're making 50 individual TikToks about the fathers of famous Sopranos characters, but bundled together over 2 hours. We need to ride this wave to get in the 500,000 homes in America that have HBO Max.
Yeah.
And David Chase was like, yeah, okay. Can I put some like stupid Buddhist bullshit in it? And they were like, absolutely. And he's like, okay, I'm in.
Yeah.
And yeah, he started like writing those scenes where he's like, you have to give up your possessions to wanting's bad. By the way, I made $2 million to completely write the worst thing that's ever been based on this incredible show I made. Actually worse in every way than Sopranos Road to Respect. Worse than the Sopranos Cards Against Humanity game I'm assuming exists.
I mean, to be fair, I thought it was peak David Chase to do a movie about the Sopranos and be like, okay, I'm going to make it 50% about Tony Soprano's family friend, and the other 50% is going to be about a black guy named Harold that we've never met.
Yeah, who I think was that just like lateral thinking where he's like, all right, there's a street gang called the Black Saints. They got to be in the Many Saints because Moltisanti, Many Saints. We got to cover it all.
Yeah.
Well, so the way that happened is I'm David Chase's friend, and he was over at my place, and I was playing Grand Theft Auto. And he was just like, doing the thing where your friend complains about their problems and like asks you questions and you're not paying attention. And he was like, oh, I don't know. Should I write a 2-hour movie that's about my perspective about race? And I was like, yeah, totally. Yeah. And only after he left did I realize what I had done.
I gotta say, my biggest problem with The Many Saints of Newark, a Sopranos story, at least in contrast to the original series, not enough socialism.
Yeah. Unfortunate.
There is very little leftism and praxis in The Many Saints of Newark. But before we get into the film itself, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up this article from the Wall Street Journal this week, just checking in on how the real life Sopranos are faring in 2021. And the answer is, much like this movie, not very good. It says here, lousy management, knucklehead hires, plague operations of real life Sopranos. So it says, the kiss of death for mafia families isn't necessarily from gang wars or snitches. These days, organized crime is threatened more by mismanagement, lousy hires, and half-baked successions plans. Former mob investigators point to the case against Andrew Russo, the man federal prosecutors allege heads the Colombo crime family, one of the 5 storied mafia clans that ruled the New York underworld for much of the last century. The alleged Colombo leader's management troubles seem to mirror those of Tony Soprano, the fictional TV mob boss who wrestled with picking a successor and keeping his hands out of the dirty work. Mr. Russo was arraigned September 14th in a crippling takedown of the Colombo family's C-suite leaders and middle managers. Prosecutors said in court documents that Mr. Russo, his underboss, consigliere, several captains, and other subordinates carried out over 2 decades a purported scheme to extort money from a New York City union and a related healthcare fund. I wonder if that union is the Sergeant's Benevolence Association, because the FBI was but here's the nut graph of the piece. It says here, Mr. Curtis said the top-level micromanaging in the Colombo case reflected concerns about the incompetence of lower-level members. A new generation of wise guys didn't properly learn the business, according to former government investigators. Older members complain that the millennials who grew up in the suburbs instead of city streets are softer, dumber, and not as loyal as the mobsters of past.
I mean, that's fair.
Plus,
that's probably true. They were probably like, hey, you guys want to put some money in GameStop? They definitely didn't have like schemes brewing that would mix well with the mafia.
I mean, I take this article at face value here, but I do like the suggestion that the previous generations of the Colombo family were smart and
had
loyal.
a good succession plan that didn't just involve like their old boss getting whacked by the new boss.
Yeah, Carlo Gambino, who's like as close to like a competent, like smart mobster as you can really get. Like that's who they kind of based Carmine Lupertazzi Sr. off of. His plan for like after he died was like, the guy in charge should be the guy that everyone hates. Okay, I'm dying now. Peace.
Yeah.
But it's not over here. It says here, the problem with these softer, dumber, suburban made guys is they're always texting. Everything is on the phones with them, said a former maid member of the Colombo family who knows some of the men accused in the case. One Colombo associate is accused of sending threatening texts to a union official over extortion collections. Hey, this is quote here. Hey, this is the second text. There isn't going to be a third, the associate wrote, according to court records. I'm sure that is frowned upon in mob circles, former FBI agent and crisis management consultant Richard Frankel said of what appeared to be incriminating texts. Oh. So yeah, if you were going to be involved in organized crime, highly recommended that you not text the victims of your extortion
you gotta use
plots
Signal chat.
that you were doing crimes.
Yeah,
to them.
use a Signal chat, something encrypted for sure. Do not send an email that says, hey, I've got a gun and I'm going to shoot you with it, sent from my iPhone, because they're gonna be able to tell.
It is like, it's hard to like have a mafia without like a production economy.
Yeah.
That's the main thing. It's just like the only thing we do is just like new ways to like lubricate the consumer experience and have new classes of servants for people who work at offices. And like, so the only new things that get created in the economy are like, oh, there's an even faster service where a slave will bring you Uncrustables. So like that 15-minute like grocery delivery service. And like, so there's just like less and less opportunities for like the mafia to get in along the way. And like, I do sort of think we should have a strong mafia, if not just for like, there are more activities you can do. Yeah. Like there's like there would be like a secret casino in Manhattan, like stuff like that. There'd be more gambling. There'd be more fun stuff to do. It would be like a good job for some people. Like that's the only job some people can do. But it's really like you would have to totally bring the clock back on the economy to have a mafia.
You need production to actually shut down.
Yeah, you can't like extort Grubhub.
Right.
Like if you were like, oh, we're gonna kill a bunch of the drivers, they'd be like, we were gonna do that.
Saving us time.
Like we don't care. Like fuck you.
Well, Matt, as you said, Chrisman, as you said in the article, this is very like it shows that The Sopranos, the TV show, is very prophetic in a way, in that it showed the transition of one generation to another of mafia leaders.
Yeah, it's a breakfast cereal called Oops All AJ's.
But was there like ever a time when like mafia dudes actually didn't snitch? I mean, there's like this idea that the made man ceremony meant something in like some past day, but like they kind of were always snitching on each other when they went
No,
down?
of course,
Like,
it was all bullshit all the time.
Yeah.
But it's just it was harder
No,
to get.
yeah.
It was harder to get in trouble even with the snitching before RICO.
Right.
Which honestly, it was very unfair to just change the rules in the middle of the game that way.
Yeah.
I do think we should like repeal RICO. Like I did, like kind of. I don't know.
If we want to have fun mafia again, we're gonna have to get rid of RICO because it's impossible to do cool mafia crimes when it's like illegal to hang out with somebody who does crimes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like, yeah, like if you look at like the consequences of RICO, it's just like no like gain can really get that big, which I guess is the goal. They'd be like, oh, we did what we wanted to do, but it's just like, well, there's still going to be crime, and so just like different smaller sets of people just like killing each other and like reprisals and counter reprisals.
Right. Just
And
crime
it's, like,
sucks now. Like crime used to be like fun
Yeah.
and cool, and now it's like boring and
Yeah.
involves crypto.
Yeah, it's like, don't you think it would be cool if like BMF was still like huge? Like that's my pitch to repeal RICO. Like, wouldn't it be fun? Like, it would be a new thing. There would be like, yeah, no. The thing with organized crime is that like, yeah, there are more activities.
You got numbers, prostitution, unions, and clean, safe heroin that doesn't have fentanyl in it.
Yeah, no, that shit only started happening like after we destroyed everything.
Yeah, you know, we don't have the good old fashioned Italian mafia to go into the heroin and just pick out, you know, all the little pieces of fentanyl that just comes with it. You know, we need to bring the mafia back purely just to purify our drug supply. I mean, that's
yeah, even that, like any like large organized crime group, like if you like. How many people do you think get tainted stuff from Costco? Probably not that many.
yeah.
But it's kind of just they're doing the same thing that they've done with every industry, which is that, you know, you don't really do customer service face to face like with anyone in any situation anymore, and that like it includes extortion. Like it used to be, you know, you got extorted by someone who maybe lived in your neighborhood, but now like there's already 10 different faceless organizations doing that for them.
Yeah.
To expand the aperture here outside of the real life mafia to the world of the fictional Jersey mob as portrayed in The Sopranos, I mean, it's unquestionable that The Sopranos now, like, you know, so some 20 years after it was on TV, is going through like a renewed cultural renaissance. And it's one that the New York Times took note of in a recent article. Why is every young person in America watching The Sopranos? And of course, Vince and Matt, they name check you guys
article.
on there.
I just want to say
It says-
this has nothing to do with the fact that they name checked our podcast. It was just it was beautifully written. I didn't finish it, but it sound like halfway through I was like, I get it. And yeah, fantastic.
Yes, the podcast in question, of course, is Gabagool and
How
Roses,
dare
the
you.
only leftist Sopranos podcast.
How fucking when I read that, I was just like, who are these fucking mooks who claim to have the only, and then I realized they were just ripping on our joke in which we say we are the only Sopranos podcast.
Well, the New York Times goes on to say, because there's also the much more popular Pod Yourself a Gun, which frequently brings in guests from the expanded Brooklyn leftist podcast scene. But
I live in Manhattan. I'm a lifelong Manhattan resident.
But Felix, they quote you for like nearly a half a paragraph here, and you say of the show's just sort of the way the show only gets more relevant with time, which is I think a testament of what like a great work of art is, especially in an era now in which most art, even good art, seems very disposable, or it has a very limited half-life. And you're quoted here as writing or saying rather, decline not as a romantic, singular, aesthetically breathtaking act of destruction, he said, but as a humiliating slow motion slide down into a puddle of filth. You don't flee burning Rome with your beautiful beloved in your arms, barely escaping a murderous horde of barbarians. You sit down for 18 hours a day, enjoy fewer things than you used to, and take on the worst qualities of your parents while you watch your kids take on the worst qualities of you. How do you see that essential Sopranos vision of like family and just the general rotten state of like 21st century America? Like, how do you think that contributes to this resurgence and kind of timeless quality of the show?
I think because like everyone is on some level aware that they're like an AJ or a Meadow or like, I mean, I'm broadly speaking in like the universe of people who can like afford HBO streaming and like, yeah, the permanent to hire the permanent slave class we've created through apps, blah, blah, blah. Like the people this article, Willie Stallio's article is talking about. You are either like completely zeroed in on whatever you want, even though that thing you want is like always shifting, and you're very self-possessed, and you have an almost like gangster-like quality of being able to cross people out, to run people over, and to just internalize whatever bad implication of whatever the thing you're doing is. Or you're just floating from thing to thing until you can finally like glom onto something that's stable enough that you can like 70 to 80% replicate like the financial profile of your parents, maybe. Or if you're an older millennial, maybe you're a little Carmine.
Yeah.
And you've found peace and you're a good person.
Thank you. Vince and Matt, though, I mean, you guys are certainly at the forefront of the Sopranos restoration here. But like, what is it about the show? Like considering it, like, I mean, obviously, like for me, like rewatching the show, the thing that sticks out the most is how fucking unbelievably funny it is. Like, it's like some of the funniest writing that's ever been on TV. But like, what about the show speaks to you guys in the year 2021?
Well, essentially, The Sopranos is a show about like titties, meat, and respect, and that's a trifecta of things that everybody likes. But also, I think where it relates to, I think most people now is just kind of. I don't know. There's something about watching something that is essentially a sitcom about a suburban dad who hates his son, set in like a kind of the decline of, I don't know, the capital of a capitalist empire, that I think, you know, as I don't know, as America slips further and further down this line of just turning into a giant corporatized, you know, not really democracy, I feel like people are looking back at The Sopranos as, I don't know, kind of prophetic, because you just see that like there is, you know, in the article they mentioned that scene where they try to extort a guy who works at a Starbucks, and and they're like, oh man, this is you know, it's over for the little guy. And I feel like now it's like never been more over for the little guy than it is currently in 2021. There just does not exist a little guy. And now we're kind of like looking back at mafia crime and going like, that was a signal that at one point America had like a thriving small business community that no longer exists. Also, it's very funny. Yeah. And did I mention titties?
Yeah, it's like we're definitely way past like the death of monoculture, but like that show was on from like 99 to 2007. So like even in the course of that show, like you kind of go from like there being some idea of a monoculture to it like dying like throughout the course of the show. And it's just it's funny to watch them, like you said, just basically trying to do this sort of pantomime of what their idea of like the mafia is. I think one of the reasons like the movie is not as good is because like the main character is struggling like with whether he's a good person and whether he's like going to hell or whatever. But like in the Sopranos, like Tony's dilemma was like, am I a toxic person? It wasn't like the old school you know, God and the devil type shit. It was like the late 90s iteration of that, where it's like he doesn't even care about like heaven or hell. It's like, am I like self-actualized as a dad? Yeah.
Well, I think like something that like made the original show work so well was like, if everything that we've described is sort of like the meat of it. It's the dominating flavor. Well, the bread, the thing that holds everything together, is that it goes into the mafia in this way that like Goodfellas does. The same reason that like is integral to why Goodfellas is important. Instead of like the modern like hyper focus on characters as this thing that's designed so people will always talk about them and uniquely relate to the characters and make it their entire personality. While the show was very character focused, everything that held it, the thing that held everything together was that like you really get into the specifics of like what type of scams they're doing, or like the interpersonal, like day-to-day bullshit of like running a small mafia crew. That was just like very enjoyable to see. Like, it's enjoyable to see people driving like expensive but like sort of like garish and embarrassing cars and outfits, and like, oh, this is what it's like when you like pick up money from a place you're extorting. This is how you would do like a real estate scam. And it's a look into a different enough world that it like totally hooks you. And with this, I felt like with like the movie, I felt like it's the opposite. Like, it's very much a modern creation where like I could barely pick up what they were actually doing to make money. It was like those TikToks where like a really handsome like 22-year-old like wears a hat and goes like, POV, I'm in the mafia and I'm your dad and you're my hostage. Because it's like, what mafia things are they fucking doing? It's just all about the fucking characters, and the character stuff isn't even that good. Like, I feel like Dickie could have been like such a fucking good character to look at, because it's like, that's a very of type question for this now franchise. Like, oh, am I a good person or not? And it's like, no, you're the shittiest you're like one of the worst people like alive. But they fucking blow it. They make it so much about the character, and they don't even like really show you that many interesting contours.
Yeah. You'd think after, 6.5 seasons of The Sopranos, now like years later to do a prequel where like the main character is questioning like, am I a good person or not, would seem a little bit irrelevant, because it's like, yeah, it's been established. You're all going to hell. You're all deeply irredeemable people. And, you know, if the Sopranos, the TV series, was sort of a through the focus on this family and their day-to-day lives, is a sort of broader a threnody, a dirge for the death of 20th century America. And, you know, with the acknowledgement that like what's dying was never all that good or nice to begin with, but with the bone deep assurance that we all feel that whatever's coming next is going to be worse. Now this would be a good time to talk about the movie The Many Saints of Newark, a Sopranos story, because it fits that prophecy to a T, because what comes after is not all that good. So, gentlemen, shall we get into a Sopranos story?
Let's do it, dude. It's I just want a quick defense of Dickie Moltisanti's character in this. I think, yes, they really didn't they didn't make him interesting enough for me to say that he was necessarily a good character. But what I did like about it is, just from like the vantage point of Tony Soprano in the show The Sopranos, he's looking back at this guy as like, man, this was the coolest guy I knew. This was the guy in the neighborhood who was like, he was who we all modeled ourselves after. And then in the movie, he's just like a guy who like steals speakers and he says the N-word, and he takes him to rated R movies. Like, the fact that he's kind of this boring guy who sucks, like that's the reality of this like glorified past he looks on. I enjoyed that, maybe on like a meta level, not necessarily a level they intended.
That's good, but it's like that it would have worked better if I have to say, in general, this is a huge L for movie magic. And a vindication of TV trickery, the highest art form. Because, like, the things that made characters like that, like, sing in The Sopranos, and for you to, like, be able to immediately, like, get the meta jokes of it, were two things. It was, like, the humor of it, like, the very subtle humor of every scene, like, going from explicit things like malapropisms that like serve the function of both being funny and showing how like outside of society they are, that no normal person has ever corrected them on these, to like, the types of things that they think are cool, whether it's like the jacket or like, Dickie Moltisanti. But this is like a uniquely humorless Sopranos product. And also the other thing is like the constant like tension and foreboding. And I realize that's like kind of the tension part's a little difficult when it's like something that's already happened. But like, I was remembering like Sopranos home movie, like what a good episode that is, because it's like there's this constant like shitty feeling around it. Like something like obviously something bad is going to happen, but also just like even the moments of downtime are just filled with this constant like resentment and shitty feeling and emptiness, the like purposeful emptiness. And there's like just none of that here.
Yeah, I think you read you read a certain amount of blind spots into everybody's like worldview in The Sopranos, and that's kind of very deliberate. Like the episode that this whole movie basically comes out of is the episode where the Newark race riots are going on, and Tony's like entire memory of that day was like not getting to go to the amusement park, and like that is such like a more relevant comment on race and race politics, and especially like the way these characters deal with it, than actually going back and trying to have like an entire storyline of like a burgeoning black gang that they tried to do in this movie. It's like he was trying to do the exact thing that The Sopranos deliberately had a blind spot about.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you bring it up because like the two main characters in this movie are Dickie Moltisanti, Christopher's father, played by Alessandro Nivola. You might remember from such role as Castor Troy, Pollux Troy, Castor's brother from Face Off. And that's it. He's been in a lot of
He
movies.
was in one of the Jurassic Parks.
Oh yeah, he was in Jurassic Park 3.
I didn't see that one, but that's a movie.
And then the other main character is a black guy named Harold, who starts out as a runner for Dickie, and then goes like inspired by sort of burgeoning black nationalism, like decides to like go out on his own and start his own book, backed by American gangster Frank Lucas, who makes a cameo appearance. But like, here's the question. Have they made the friggin' Sopranos woke? Because the original show was about loving America, loving your family, honor, loyalty, and small
Loving
business
Christopher
entrepreneurialism.
Columbus.
Yeah.
It was they made so I mean like this does seem like it does seem like it was like a largely unnecessary attempt on the filmmakers of this movie to like correct this blind spot that existed on the show.
Terrible idea.
And to portray
Terrible.
essentially the kind of like how fucked up. It is to me showed like how fucked over and abused the black community of Newark was, particularly in this weird relationship that they had with Italian Americans. But I mean, what did you guys make of the overall like the inclusion of black people in a way that The Sopranos never really has? Dealt
other
with
than
before?
it being possibly just a giant troll by David Chase, because no one hates the fans more than David Chase. I do think that it was a poor decision. I mean, in this rewatch of The Sopranos that Vince and I are doing on the podcast, something that I never noticed at the time when I first watched it is that these guys do not know how to write black characters at all. They've tried many times on The Sopranos to have like a black character, like they had.
Remember Bokeem Woodbine is massive genius.
It was like, why don't
the
we
last
make
one we watched had like two black kids on the beach discovering a body, and one kid says to the other one, "I heard that, man," and it's like, nobody's said that since 1975.
Yeah, you just have these these old white TV writers trying to write black people, and it's just never worked out well in the show. I can't imagine why they would be like, okay, we get this, we got a consultant, this is going to be good black dialogue, and then it's mostly just him like watching black poetry in the 70s and being like, this is giving me ideas to do my own thing, and it just does not work.
It felt very thrown together, and the character himself was like very two-dimensional to the point where it's like, well, you just like shouldn't have done it then, because in big things, like, okay, so what's this character like? You could start with something that like could go in, like, is a decent idea and can go into a decent storyline. Like, he has this like resentment for working for Dickie and always like being looked at a certain way when he comes in to like hand off this fucking money and being talked down to. But like the rest of the character arc is he sees like black nationalist poetry and is like, oh, I'm gonna do bigger crimes.
Yeah.
And like, it just, there's no real interesting like growth or tension with that character. He has no like real contours to him, and
he wants to be in the army. That was his big thing.
He's not
Yeah,
entertainingly
but
shitty. Like every single character on The Sopranos is like an asshole in their own like unique diamond sort of way, and he's like not really that at all. Like there's no interesting idiosyncrasies to him.
We should mention the Harold is played by Leslie Odom Jr. And like it just it seemed like they wanted to include
Leslie Odom Jr.
like Leslie Odom Jr. No, but yeah, you're right. Like they didn't give his character any of the appealing, revolting aspects of every other character, which made him very flat. And
also the other thing I was going to say is like. There's so like little attention to detail with him and his backstory versus like the other characters when they're writing him, because it's like with other characters throughout this entire franchise now, like there's like an attention paid to like, oh yeah, this guy wouldn't know this guy, like this guy would have never met this guy, he's not important enough. Like Carmine Sr. wouldn't know who fucking Paulie is really. But like, so this guy who was just a runner for like a member of a crew in fucking New Jersey would be like, oh yeah, no, my friend Frank Lucas.
Right. Like because they were both from North Carolina. See?
Yeah, like they would have known each other. Like that's ridiculous.
I mean, it's a very white thing to do, where it's just kind of like, you know how all black people know each other. In this case, it'll be he knows Frank Lucas.
Well, it also feels like the entire storyline is sort of like the Italian American fantasy that black people were copying us. Like,
yeah. I should mention that this film is directed by Alan Taylor, who you might remember from such films as Terminator Genesis and Thor: The Dark World. They should have called this movie Sopranos: The Dark World, because I don't know if you guys noticed, but the color correction on this movie was terrible. They had the sheen was all off. It was this like very gray, blue, like dark, like fucking like just palette to everything, and I thought the movie was very ugly, and I had problems with that from like the get-go.
I don't think anyone in The Sopranos watches movies. At this point, I'm convinced that David Chase is like so bitter about the fact that he became a famous TV guy that he saw that like, you know, dark color correction in it, and he was just like, yeah, I guess this is what movies look like, and it's just awful.
You know how like in movies nowadays, whenever it's set in a foreign country, be it like Mexico or the Middle East, they give it that like very like that desaturated fucking like color correction on it. It's like they do the same thing for this one, but it's just like in the past. That there were less colors in the 70s.
Yeah, everything now made after like really Trump was president looks like either like a student film but made by like the son of a billionaire who's in the class, which is what this looks like, or it looks like a college humor sketch, which is what the new Cowboy Bebop is.
And in that way, and also in the way that it shoehorns in this black character, the movie really does have a meta commentary on the decline since The Sopranos. Like everybody in The Sopranos was aware that they were living in a declining age and fearing the fact that things could only get worse. And here is a movie in the same universe that comes out like half a decade later that is in every respect worse, and worse in ways that are identifiable, like the anxiety of white creators who feel obligated to include a black perspective, which is as good as an obligatory element of a movie ends up being. And then also it looks like the same cheap dog shit as everything else that's made now.
Yeah.
So the film begins. I mean, it is, I thought, very appropriate. And you know what? Maybe even a troll on David Chase's part. I think you may be right about that, Matt. The movie begins, a movie that is the resurrection of a dead TV series, begins with the thoughts and voices of dead people. It opens up in a graveyard, and it opens up in a graveyard, and as it moves from grave to grave, you hear the occupants of each earthly resting place, just like nattering on in their thoughts about like the things that they did in their lives or should have done, until we get to the grave of one Christopher Moltisanti. And Michael Imperioli does the voiceover, and he is sort of the he just shows up in a couple times in this movie to just be like, that was back then. back
I wish I lived back then.
This is before Neil Young walked on the moon. You know, he just gives you a little Christopherisms or whatever. But he's narrating the story of his father, and as we meet very early in the movie, his grandfather, played by Ray Liotta, who I gotta say is looking just
great.
Yes,
the Chantix is working. He's not smoking anymore. He looks very healthy.
They gave him two characters, and like the first character that they have him play is like clearly supposed to be on death's door. But at the beginning, I was just like, oh, I guess this is just what Ray Liotta looks like now. Like I didn't.
Well, well, like the one. So like when he's playing the grandfather, like I don't know, like. For like Ray Liotta's face, it looks like he's like a cat that ate a bee. Like he just like he went into the create a character screen and was like cheek size huge. He like fell asleep on the controller on that one. But like the guy who's supposed to be playing on death's door, like the uncle, like the guy who's in prison, like looks significantly healthier than he does at the grandfather, because like I don't know what he did. I don't know if they like deflated his cheekbones or what, but it's like, oh, he looks more like a regular 60-something-year-old man.
This to me was like the most baffling part about this movie, because like you show that they give you some Ray Liotta, and then shortly after Ray Liotta's character is introduced, he is killed by his own son for beating up his stepmother. The movie begins. He's just coming back from Italy, and he has this gorgeous Italian bride who's like 40 years younger than him. He bought her from some village or whatever, and she's like, I happen to be in America. Like she loves it, but then like he throws her down the stairs, and then Dickie, of course, is like is super into her as well. I mean, who wouldn't be? He kills his father, and I'm like, oh. Well, I guess that's the end of Ray Liotta. Nope. Nope. If you were disappointed, if you were disappointed 15 minutes into this movie that they squandered Ray Liotta, do not fear, because he is introduced again through the baffling plot contrivance that he has a twin brother.
That was
who's
my question.
In jail.
They never said the word twin, did they? Like, was he supposed to be a twin?
No, they just said his brother.
Yeah.
I love the idea that it's not a twin, and they were just like, well, Ray's already on set, guys. Can we just use him again? Because doing two for the price of one on Ray Liotta is pretty wild choice.
And the character they use him for is like maybe the worst in the movie. Because like if you thought they made Harold Hollow, like this is the shittiest character they've ever done, because it's just like David Chase's like stupid religious shit, where it's like, oh, I need a character who's like a 70-year-old man who's been in prison for like 30 years in 1972 is like, yeah, actually I've been so in Buddhism, this is what they say. And it's like, would they have books about like deep Buddhist thought in like the state prison in New Jersey?
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
It's like they tried to make a new Melfi, but they tried to write him like he's actually giving good advice. Like that was the good thing about Melfi in the original show, was like she's supposed to be the shrink character and like to dissect Tony's psyche and all that. But like for the most of the show, she was really shitty at it, and like she was just a vehicle for them to rip on, upper middle class intellectuals as much as they do on the mafia. But then in this version, it's just like, oh no, these are all of the good things I think about myself put into this character.
Yeah, the point of Melfi is that like psychiatry is just like, and therapy is like often just a way for you to like rationalize and clinicize like your actual moral failings. And it's like, it's a good way to just like evade any personal agency you have in your own choices. But with this, it's like nothing was added by this character except for like David Chase to remind everyone that he's like into Buddhism.
I do enjoy that as a story choice, just in terms of like David Chase clearly has this idea of himself as like, an intellectual who sort of doesn't play by the rules of studio notes, and he's always like trying to avoid doing like audience service type shit.
Right.
But he's also such like a TV writer at heart that he still can't help but write like, oh yeah, he's got an identical twin brother who shows up. Like he's still doing like weird 70s like detective show plot twists in all of his movies.
I mean, if David Chase is turned off by fan service, then I don't know what was going on. I don't know what. I mean, maybe this is just him trolling, because there are so many parts, especially in the second half of this movie, where like you get to see Uncle Junior say he never had the makings of a varsity athlete. You're like, that's the line. He said it. Ah!
There was countless like moments of fan service that like it felt like David Chase has reached a point where his hatred for the Sopranos fan has like, I don't know, it's like reached a level. It's done a 180, and now he hates people who know that he hates the fans. So now he hates me. It's very strange, but I was just like, his attempt to make the most unlikable movie ever. And that's art, dude. That's just what art is.
Yeah, he put like all these heavy hitters in the cast, where he put like Corey Stoll and Vera Farmiga and John Bernthal and Tony Soprano's or James Gandolfini's son.
But then he's like, oh yeah,
but the movie's not really about them at all. He's just gonna come by for like 2 scenes and then they're gonna be gone.
So the whole first hour of this movie, which felt like 3, just basically introduces Harold as a character, and then it gives you like the young versions of, like you said, John Bernthal is Johnny Boy, Tony's father. Vera Farmiga is Livia. There was one funny scene at Janice's confirmation where Livia is introduced. She's tending to the baby carriage of the youngest soprano sister and just blowing cigarette smoke directly into the
Meanwhile,
crib.
Hollywood Dick is just showing a picture of his hot wife to a priest, and it's just like, look at that. Like that was pretty fantastic.
I gotta say though, out of all of the castings of the young versions of your favorite characters, Corey Stoll as Uncle Junior was the biggest misfire. Because nothing about that worked at all for me.
Yeah,
they turned him into like a catchphrase deliverer.
Right.
He was just like, oh, just cunt, and like that. Like they're like, oh, that's Uncle June.
I didn't realize Uncle June had catchphrases until this movie.
Yeah. They really like just decided to make him a vehicle for fan service, without really expanding too much on what his character was, because we only know him as the sickly old man in The Sopranos. So there's like an endless there's endless possibilities for what that character could have been. But they decided to just kind of make him like, I don't know, like a beta cuck intellectual.
Yeah, I liked the characterization overall, but then they did like they had him slip on the sidewalk and like break his hip, so that I guess it could just like the young version of him mirrors him being old and decrepit. Like what the fuck?
No, that was the origin story for why he goes down on women.
Okay.
So that's basically, he's just like, that's the only way I can please a woman now, because his dick don't work no more.
Well, I mean, so anyway, so like the first hour of the movie takes place in 1967. Tony is quite young. It's not his son. It's not James Gandolfini's son yet. But it's another
who
child
kind of
actor,
upstages Michael Gandolfini a little bit, which I felt like that was the biggest blow.
I think Michael Gandolfini like was given an impossible task and like acquitted himself pretty well.
Yeah.
Yes, I there was something I did find genuinely touching about seeing him play his father, basically, and I thought like in an impossible task, I thought he did a very good job with it. That being said, the whole first hour of the movie is essentially all a setup leading to the Newark riots of 1967, which is like, as a real historical event goes. I mean, like the whole first hour of the movie just went nowhere, and I felt like the riots would be a cool thing to portray, but like it just basically like it gives Dickie an excuse to murder his father and blame it on black people.
Yeah, that was pretty much the entire setup. And also, by the end of this movie, you find out that literally the entire Harold storyline is a red herring for what is going to happen to Dickie Moltisanti. So it is kind of like, it is baffling as to what the purpose of at least one full hour of this movie is. Very strange.
Yeah. But like the whole Sopranos is like every scene is sort of a vehicle for dissecting the individual ways in which everyone's shitty. Whereas like this entire storyline with Harold, it's basically just like expository dialogue explaining how like the numbers game works. And then expository dialogue explaining like, oh, this is how the Italians treat the black gang. Like none of it's actually characterizing anybody in those scenes. It's all just explaining the broad strokes of the plot, which aren't that interesting.
And like and it'll just sort of like remind, like, you know, in dialogue they'll just remind you like Vietnam is happening. Hey, like actually black people have like a per capita like a way higher draft numbers and casualties than everyone else. So it's like, you know, anger, race, America, like these things are just like, oh, like that leads to the Newark riots, and then like it happens, and then it just jumps ahead in time, and it's the 70s now, and like the second half of the movie sort of like it came alive to me a little bit more, and then with the introduction of Michael Gandolfini playing like a now a teenage era Tony Soprano. He's in high school, and you see him again, like it's really not focused on him almost at all. Like there you get a little bit of him, and you get like a little bit of his ambitions to be an NFL player, but also his flirtation with like petty crime, and you know his sort of the seduction of him by this what he perceives as sort of a glamorous lifestyle as embodied by his uncle, which really means like you get to like have a girlfriend who you buy a beauty parlor for and then murder.
It's a wonderful life where you can like get speakers for free and TV trays. It's like there's nothing. You just realize in watching this that like they made the mafia possibly more boring than they do in The Sopranos in a way that I felt like did not serve it. Like it didn't feel like it was like sending an intentional message. It was just like, yeah, you know, he's really attracted to the life where he can steal, like he can hijack a Mr. Frosty and give people ice cream.
I did actually. I very much like the scene where it's a Jackie Aprile, young Tony, and fucking Artie, young like teenage Artie Bucco, who's like, we're gonna get in so much trouble, guys. They hijack a Mr. Softy truck and then just take it to a park and give people free soft serve. I like that scene because it showed just hints of Tony, both his sort of impish, his boyishness, but also his gluttony.
Right.
The gluttony angle that they did in this movie, I thought for Tony's character was actually great. They did a lot of really like him stealing the Mr. Frosty. At one point, he
hamburgers far out.
He comes home. He goes, oh, hamburger, cool, and he's just like he's stoked on it. Like stuff like that, I thought was great. Like it added a lot to the character.
I liked the Mr. Softy scene. Like that to me makes a lot of sense for who Tony is, where he's like he's doing petty crimes and he's like beating up an ice cream man, but for no real higher purpose other than to just give out free ice cream. But I feel like that scene is in direct contradiction to him feeling conflicted about getting stolen speakers. Like you're telling me the same guy that just like beat up an ice cream man and like gave out free ice cream to the neighborhood gives a shit about whether like speakers are stolen or not? Like it didn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's the type of thing that like would be better served by a show where there's like peaks and valleys in his feelings like that. This sort of thing that the show did like expertly. But like in the movie, it just everything's so rapid and like no scene has any time to like simmer. Everything is so short that like you get whiplash. It's like, wait, when did this character change come? That happens like pretty much every other scene. There's something like that going on.
Yeah, there's scene transition is like a loud song kicking in all of a sudden. I don't know if you noticed that.
Yeah, David, they were like, David, we're gonna run this movie when you go on the HBO Max menu. If you are able to log into HBO Max at all, it's going to be in between a show called like the happenstance. It's about an OBGYN who's psychic, and like a sort of like a stand-up comedy special where the laugh track is edited out. And he was like, okay, but I need a $30 million budget for licensed music. And they were like, of course.
Another good use of a Van Morrison song in this movie. We all remember the Glad Tidings from the scene where Tony Blundetto gets his head blown off by Tony with a shotgun. And also that a good use of the Rolling Stones song Sway. It's just that demon life got you in its sway. Yeah. Demon life here being Italian. I mean, one thing I was like, the scene where Tony comes home and he's like, "Oh, hamburger, cool, mom," is the one scene where you see. I thought it was effective. That this scene was good with young Livia, because the scene starts out. And it's like the one indication you get that Livia is like has any affection towards her kids at all. And it starts out, she's like, "Oh, like I made you a special lunch or whatever." And he's like, "Oh, thanks, Mom." And then like it turns on a dime. Like she's excited. She's ready to go in the city and see a show or something with her friends. And she wanted to do something nice for Tony. And then like it turns on a dime because she brings up about how like she doesn't go to Dr. Cuomo anymore, presumably because he's too handsy. No, she doesn't go to the family doctor anymore because he keeps trying to push mood stabilizers on her, and she's like, "That's for crazy people." And then Tony sings the Rolling Stones song, Mother's Little Helper. And then she's like, "Are you on pot? Your sister smells like a gypsy. How can I go to the city without thinking about my children on pot?" And I just like the way it's like it just turns on a dime. And like what starts out as like a genuinely like nice moment between mother and her son just becomes rancid like almost instantly because of Livia's just like horrible psychology.
I thought that was fantastic. It was like, to me, after that scene, I was like, "Oh, fuck. Now I wish this was the whole movie." If the whole movie had been about young Tony Soprano trying to get Ellaville for his crazy mother, I'd have been like, that was a good movie. But they just made it this like weird D story an hour and a half into the movie that just kind of peters out.
Again, a thing that would have been better done on a TV show.
Exactly.
I wouldn't want to be a movie fan right now. I'll say that.
I mean, it definitely felt like a pilot.
TV tricksters.
It felt like a pilot or like a proof of concept, and then you get to the end, and then that ending, Jesus Christ. But yeah, but like 2 days after I saw the movie, I saw that David Chase had signed like a new development deal with HBO, which made a lot of sense. We're like, okay, maybe it just was a pilot.
Yeah.
I'm like now, I did not initially think in the way that you guys thought. I will admit I'm like a very cynical person. I always assume the worst in people. I thought David Chase was just like, "Oh, I think this is good." Here. But like your guys' suggestion that like he's doing this because of how much he hates literally everyone who's ever watched the show. I'm like, man, this is
if you watch it from that perspective,
yeah. If he's got a development deal and he's like, "All right, I got more Sopranos for you. I'm making a show about massive G."
Right.
it's like okay, I take it back. He's awesome.
This is revenge.
I like him even more than David Milch.
This is revenge for an industry that has spurned him for years. The TV industry is the only thing that took him in. And movies, he wanted to make Sopranos a movie. He didn't want it to be a TV show. So the best revenge is just making the worst movies. To say fuck you guys for liking this show. I could have been somebody else.
I mean, it makes sense. This guy, he clearly thinks movies are better than television. He's correct about that. Yeah. By the way, and they've made him make a TV show, and the show he made gave people the idea that actually TV is better than movies, and we've been living in that hell ever since.
Exactly.
Yeah. He is like David Chase. For as favorably we compare The Sopranos to like every bullshit like Netflix shit, like they do exist.
Absolutely.
Like that is
he's like if the Pixies like went on a murder spree and killed all of like every grunge artist who existed, every post punk, and just decide because they're like, I hate what I have created. That's what he's doing in the form of Sopranos movie.
Yeah, I still don't know whether it's like
this is, by the way, this is something that I can't relate to at all. So
to him hating everyone.
I couldn't tell.
Well, like like it is like okay, it's like if like we ended the show and then like 10 years later, like Spotify, Disney, Hulu, or whatever company like exists like 15 years from now is like, okay, we're gonna give you like $20 million to bring it back, and we're like, oh, okay. And it's like, it's just me, Matt, and Will just talking with Matthew Walter for every episode. Like, oh, you wanted it back, huh?
In another possible troll, but certainly fuck you to the guys who thought Tony was the boss and the man, because it's obviously David Chase despises the culture of New Jersey fucking shitheads and like the mob in general. Is his inclusion of the plot line that involves Dickie Moltisanti's gorgeous Guma, the beautiful Italian girl who was once his stepmother, now his girlfriend. The inclusion of a plot line in which he ends up having sex with Leslie Odom Jr.'s character and then confessing it to Dickie Moltisanti, which is like, okay, if you thought it would be cool or okay with your lover, it was an Italian mob guy, to admit to having sex with another man, you got another thing coming. If you think it would be okay to admit to having sex with a black man, oh, that's the one thing you don't do. And then what does he do? He immediately drowns her in the ocean.
But first he says the N-word, and I was like, wow. Problematic.
Because he had not said it the entire movie. He had not said it the entire movie, and it was pretty clear that they were making Dickie Moltisanti out of the crew that he rolled in was clearly supposed to be the most progressive Italian man of the late 60s. In that, like, he would be nice to a black guy for any reason.
Okay, hold on. Rewind the first scene we seen with Harold when they talk about like how they beat the other team when they were in the football team. What football team in like 1930s New Jersey or 1940s New Jersey was desegregated?
Yeah, they're high school buddies from the football
I just
team.
like that she waited until she was on a secluded beach to confess to fucking his black friend. I was like, well, now that there's no one else around and we're near a body of water, this seems like a great time to tell you what's been on my mind.
So, like, I thought the character of Giuseppina existed. Well, number one, she existed to do this kind of like pseudo, like Freudian thing.
The whole scene where she fucks the guy, like where she's like, the whole scene exists to be like, oh yeah, I fucked a black guy and it wasn't that good. I actually still like fucking Italian guys. Like, what was that? The whole scene?
I don't understand. I've been trying to piece her entire storyline together to understand why she existed initially, other than the pseudo-Freudian thing, which it's not Freudian to fuck your stepmom. Stepmoms are fair game. I think everybody knows that.
Yeah, it's the number one porn category
That's totally
on the internet.
Fine.
Dickie, I'm trapped in that washing machine.
No, Matt, the reason for the inclusion of her character, you said it right at the beginning of the episode.
Yeah, no, it was definitely for titties, also so we can watch her cooking meat.
She's fucking.
No, she was.
Real nice.
It was great. Yeah. I went a little Google for her. She was very hot. And at first I thought maybe she was like, oh, she kind of looks like Chris Moltisanti. Maybe she's actually Chris's mom. Like I thought that was gonna be what happens. She's got the same nose, but then they don't mention that at all. In fact, she has, Dickie's wife does have a baby. So then at this point, it can only lead me to believe that her inclusion existed. So at some point, Dickie could say the N-word, which feels like it's a strange reason to have an entire character. It was just like a character that existed so it could be like, now it's on between me and this Moulignan. And it's like, it's just it made no sense to me. I don't understand why they would do it.
Here's another thing in the movie that I thought felt very out of place to me, which was the inclusion of like 2 or 3 scenes of like extreme violence. Like there's a scene where like Paulie and Silvio and Dickie torture one of Harold's associates by like drilling the teeth out of his head in like an auto garage and then shooting him dead. And then the retaliation for that is some fat guy's like, oh, I'd like to smell her shit. About, like
comedian Joey Diaz, and his last words were, I would eat her shit, and then he gets shot in the head.
I love that so much.
And then he gets his fucking gourd just blown apart with a shotgun.
I love that so much because it wasn't like he wasn't even creative to make like a one of those sayings where it's like, oh, I'd eat a mile of her shit just to see where it came from or whatever.
Yeah, he was the same thing. It's like They just decided, no, nothing remotely clever, not even like close to a joke. Just, I would eat her shit.
Yeah,
I wanted to piss on my face.
Poo-poo come from the butt. I want to eat the butt. It's like, it's very, I like the rawness of just like being so horny. You're just like, I eat the poo-poo. I gotta eat the poo-poo. That's a level of horny I relate to.
This is another aside, but like Silvio is like canonically now 40 years older than Tony.
I didn't get that from the that
I thought he was the worst actor in this
Sylvie-
by a mile too. Like, ugh.
Yes.
He convinced me that the movie truly was a fuck you to the fans. Because David Chase.
The fact that they show Silvio without his rug on, without his toupee, and like there's one scene where in the torture scene, his fucking hairpiece comes off, and you see his horrible comb over and shit. It's like they're really. Hey, if you never liked Silvio Dante, he gets taken down a peg or two. In this film.
Definitely, he is the fan service where the hostility is the most blatant. It's like, you want to see young Silvio?
Yes.
This is what he looks like, you fucking pieces of shit.
Exactly. Lap it up, you
He's
fucking
the
hogs.
He's the Baby Yoda of the Sopranos universe for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it really was like a hostile fan service that it made me feel like the entire movie was intentionally bad. Yeah.
Another Grogu moment in this film was there's a scene where the Leslie Odom Jr. character, like he comes to the club to like talk to Dickie or something, and like they're all sitting at a table, and he orders a drink, and Paulie makes a Paulie racial comment to him about is that what they're ordering on the plantation? And then Leslie Odom Jr.'s character goes, I don't know if you heard or not, Paulie, we're not on the plantation anymore. And I was like, what? I was like,
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah,
like,
they're not even giving him clever shit to say. Like,
I mean, that was like at the height of the Rat Pack where they're all making race jokes at each other, and they couldn't come up with anything better than that exchange.
Yeah. I mean, he tacked on a lot of weird shit. Apparently, all of the Chris Moltisanti narration was also tacked on at the end because they were like, oh, people might be confused. And it's like, that didn't help.
But that whole exchange kind of goes to show you, like, the Paulie making that joke was kind of like, it's a vehicle to, to explain all the specific ways in which Paulie's like kind of shitty, and it has a very good idea of who Paulie is as a character, but it has no fucking clue who this Harold guy is. It's just like, oh, stock rejoinder from the black guy in this scene.
Yeah.
The second of these ham-fisted Grogu moments that I wanted to bring up is, okay, so like it tells you from the beginning in Chris's voiceover where he's like, that's Tony, the guy who murders me. and then when baby Christopher is introduced and teenage Anthony Soprano tries to hold him, he's like crying, and then teenage Tony Soprano is like, oh, the baby doesn't like me, probably because he thinks I'm going to murder him sometime in the future. It was just like,
they say that babies have premium cable on the other side.
no. And then, at that point, I was like, oh, this is a little heavy-handed. And then one of like the old Italian biddies, like this old lady is just like, the infants, they come with knowledge from the other side. And it's just like, oh, like this is too much. It's just in case you didn't catch that very subtle reference to like, hey, he's going to murder you in the future.
It's the ham-fisted for sure, and then just like incomprehensible at like multiple moments when he murders his dad by knocking his head against a steering wheel like 20 times. The part where I laughed the hardest in this movie is like he stops and he looks at him and he goes like, "Dad."
Yeah. Are you okay, Pop?
Are you okay, Pop? And I was like, what the fuck? Yeah, he's fine. You just knocked him. You just broke his skull with a steering wheel. It was just so weird. It made me love it, to be honest. I love that shit. Like, there was another scene where we got Dickie and Syl talking at the end. And like Syl is trying to like convince him like, hey, maybe you should let Tony come in with us. He could be a part of whatever. And Dickie goes, tell him
he could be a leader someday.
They did a Myers-Briggs and he's an ENFJ. So no, but like, so then he goes, all right, tell him to come to Holston's tomorrow. And Syl goes, there you go. And Dickie's like, let me finish for Christ's sake. Pause. Tell him 9 a.m. What the fuck? Let him finish to say the time. It's just like these weird moments where you're like, I don't know. They wrote
or
it with
the
a
whole
bot.
scene where they're like the gang guys running away from Harold, and it's just he's running down a street, and there's one hubcap on the street, and he manages to step on the fucking hubcap like it's a banana peel in a cartoon and falls down.
So the film ends with with the last piece of advice that prison Ray Liotta gives Dickie Moltisanti is like, if you care about your nephew, stay out of his life. Because I'm a piece of shit. I'm in jail for murder. I'm gonna die in prison. This is like you're gonna end up here or worse. I mean, like this is just everyone we know. This is everything we do. Only leads to like one of two outcomes. So like Dickie has this moment of like cutting off Anthony.
Well, can I just say
and,
real quick?
not buying
he
him
says
beer
right before that. He goes, "You know the song, My Favorite Things," and he's like, "Yeah," and he goes, "Maybe the things you do aren't God's favorite," which is a strange line because it's like he doesn't need the reference of my favorite things to know what the word favorite means.
Matt, he's a jazz
guy. He loves show tunes.
He loves jazz. He loves jazz music and show tunes. Yeah. So, but like, and like, he has this moment of like this crisis of conscience where he's like, "Gee, maybe I." Just shouldn't put my nephew on the train tracks to a life of fucking crime, but then and then still it's just like, what if we did the opposite? And he's like, oh, all right, okay, tell him to go to Holstein's Diner, the place that he will one day die. Wink, wink, nod, nod. And then he is murdered. And I, like again, like for the only thing that this movie like significantly introduces into like the lore or canon of The Sopranos is it reveals that Uncle Junior was the guy who got Dickie Moltisanti killed.
Yeah, well.
And it's just like, did we need to know that? Like, does it affect the show in any way? Like, were you like, oh shit, wow?
We also find out that Tony almost didn't join the mafia because his uncle wouldn't buy him beer, which I thought was like nice.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would have, as a kind of like a standalone thing, that if it was one of multiple really good plot lines, finding out that Junior is the one who killed Dickie Moltisanti, I think I would have been pretty satisfied with it. But making the whole movie center around like it literally inventing an entire red herring fucking plot line that's 50% of the movie about this guy named Harold, to have him just instead be killed by Junior because Dickie laughed when he slipped is just it's I mean, it's just like if someone, I guess like David Chase can just get money, so he was like, well, I'm gonna do what I want to do, and I'm gonna do that.
I did like, I mean, it was credible to me in so much as like the motivation for why Uncle Junior would pay some guy to have him clipped or whatever, because he laughs at him one time, but prior to that, like after Dickie's father dies or is murdered by Dickie, at the funeral, Junior's like, hey, he's like, Dickie's like, I don't have anyone right now. I don't have any family. You got your brother. Like, what do I have? And Uncle Junior says, Dickie, I want you to think of me as your brother now. And like he opens his heart to him, but it's never reciprocated. And the fact that everybody likes Dickie and he's charming and charismatic and the ladies like him is like, that's what eats away at Uncle Junior, who is
why does everybody like him so much? He's the same fucking dumbass Goomba as the rest of them. Like he dresses slightly better. Like he color coordinates. That's it. Otherwise he's just the same guy. Hey, gotta go away. What you doing? He's the same fucking dumbass as the rest of them.
Yeah,
Is there one moment where he's like notably more charming or anything than anybody else? He's literally just slightly better looking.
Yeah.
He's like not more
right. Yeah,
that's like the thing he's got going
good
for
cholesterol. Yeah. I mean, there's no real reason as to why he is supposed to be like, oh man, that guy was on top of the world. I mean, at least his father. Like, I kind of got it. Like, his father was the kind of guy who was like showing, a big-titted woman to a priest. Like, I get why people would like Hollywood Dick, but there was blandness in Dickie's character that made me wonder why make a whole movie about him if you're not going to make him interesting.
That is something you could like do in this show where he's like not identifiably like more charismatic or like smarter or funnier, but like in the movie, it just like you don't get to have time to have that joke, that meta joke cook. Do you remember I think we all like blacked this out because it was so insane. But the thing where he's talking to Ray Liotta in prison, and he's like, "Oh, one of the good things I do is I teach him blind baseball." Yes,
What the fuck?
A scene of him doing that.
And then Ray Liotta's character is like, "What? You got to be fucking kidding me!" And in the back of my mind, I'm like, "Wait, yeah, like how does that even make sense?" And then they show him doing it, and he's just coaching blind kids by being like, "Turn left, turn left."
I mean, that was one of my favorite moments because I just read that as not a thing that he actually does, but just like this way that he sees himself. Where
right, it's
like,
what a dumb guy
really
would think a good deed is.
Exactly,
a dumb guy is like, what's the goodest deed that I could do? And he's like, blind baseball, you know? He's like, handicap kickboxing. Like, he's just thinking of how to help people. And the weird thing is beat baseball apparently is a real thing, and it was also invented way after the time period of this movie. So I think it's canon that Dickie Moltisanti invented
or blind
he
baseball.
invented beat baseball.
It's a type of thing where it's like that would have been like a one-off line that like shows that he's the type of person who like does awful shit and then is like, oh, I've like thought about doing a good thing though. But in the show, it's like, no, he really did teach blind baseball, and it's like just insane choices all around.
I mean, was he actually supposed to have done that?
I don't think that was, to me, that was not a real flashback. That was just like his own.
Yeah, he was dream. I think that was as close. It's a dream sequence, and it was because at one point someone goes, "You really are a saint," which I know this movie is very on the nose, but I think that is a bridge too far. Like, it's not. Yeah,
maybe I might be being too cynical again.
Well, so the movie ends with young Anthony at Dickie's funeral, and he's looking at the open casket. Gotta be open casket. God, it's so important. So
Janice,
important. He's looking at the open casket.
Janice tells him, "Oh man, this is so sad. Remember when he used to take us to movies?" That was like, oh, cool. Like this is incredible.
And it's young Anthony. He's looking at his uncle in the open casket, and you get the opening bars of "Woke Up This Morning." You're hearing it. You're hearing he's about to get, and you're like, oh, he's about to get himself a gun. He's about to get himself a gun. But no, it's like it's looking at the casket, and then you hear Christopher's voiceover, and he's like, "That's the guy. That's the guy I went to hell for." And the movie ends with him in another like imagined sequence doing a pinky swear with his dead uncle.
Not only the weirdest choice, but like the most poorly executed choice, because there was a close-up of Dickie's hands, and he's got the rosary around his right hand. There's like no pinky ring, and then all of a sudden it's like a different hand that they show with a pinky ring on it. And like, I don't know how the fuck we were supposed to even just assume that was the same hand. And like, did Tony take the hand out of the coffin, or did the dead guy come alive? What the fuck happened there?
It's not totally out of nowhere, because earlier in the movie, Dickie makes young Tony pinky swear that he's going to be good.
He literally is like,
and he's
you
gonna,
need to do better. Swear on this. Like, that is the weirdest fucking pinky swear.
So I mean, this is Tony. Obviously, he's going to be doing bad.
The end arc with Tony is really baffling to me. So he wants to get beer for a party. Dickie says, "Get out of here, by fangu." Yeah. And then he goes to like the club or something, and he sees them doing crimes, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're offloading a truck,
and then he's like, he goes home and
he
he throws away his stolen speakers. He's like, "I'm not gonna do it. No, forget about it."
Yeah.
Then his beloved Uncle Dickie is murdered in a gangland execution. And then at the funeral, he's like, "I'm going to do crimes." All of those things are pushing in one direction.
It's the opposite thing that he pinky swear to as well.
No. See, I think what happened was he almost not did crime because his uncle wouldn't buy him beer, and then Silvio, future worst consigliere ever, talked his uncle out of it. Actually, talked him into getting his nephew back into crime.
Right,
and then now he's doing crimes.
But why did he pinky swear?
Okay,
why did he at the end?
The pinky swear made no sense to me.
How does your uncle get
level.
murdered in a mafia killing? made you like, that's it, I'm going to do the crimes that I was ambivalent about. I was wondering. But you know what? Seeing him here dead in the fucking casket, it really makes me think this is the life for me.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I mean, this is like the last bit of like real fan service in this movie. It's because there's a scene earlier in the movie where Anthony tells Dickie, he's like, he sees a guy get shot on the street. He sees one of his, uncle's cousins, friends, or whatever. He gets shot by the police, and he's like, Dickie, I don't want that to happen to me. And Dickie goes, hey, as long as I'm around, you're gonna be fine, kid. And then the movie ends with Dickie being murdered. And the second to last scene in the movie is young Anthony at Holstein's Diner, where the last scene of the show takes place and what many people interpreted as the Tony Soprano's death scene. But like this movie, I think Chase is making it fairly clear here that like, in case there's any ambiguity, the end of The Sopranos is Tony's death.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is a way to look at it. I still think it's relatively ambiguous.
Yeah, a little bit, but I mean, he's putting his thumb on
There
the
was
scale
no
a little
bird
bit.
there, so he couldn't have died.
Yeah.
I think like we're gonna think that then in 7 years we're gonna get like a new Sopranos where it's like, no, actually nothing happened in the diner, and it's just like shitty new Sopranos with like an aged CGI Michael Gandolfini, and he's like, and it's just like him being like, what the fuck is TikTok? If David Chase really wants to be like fuck the fans, I would love it if he wrote that. If he has Tony like get on TikTok and like drives a Prius and shit, that would be awesome.
Well, I don't know if you guys clocked this or not, but like the pinky swear was not actually the end of the movie. In one final troll of the audience, this movie includes a post-credit sequence where it says directed by Alan Taylor. You hear woke up this morning, got yourself a gun. You're like, damn, that's The Sopranos, baby. Then it cuts to a scene of Leslie Odom Jr. and he's on the street and he's like meeting with his head guys. He's clocking money. He's like doing business and shit. And you're like, this is like was only included because like I know David Chase just knows his audience, and they were like, oh, we're gonna see Anthony. He got himself a gun. He's gonna kill this dude soon. Oh, he's gonna kill this Shine. Get revenge for his uncle, and then nothing happens. It's just Harold. He just clocks a big bankroll, puts it in his pocket, and he's like, "All right, I'll see you guys later."
To me,
Done.
that to me is David Chase also saying "fuck you" to like Marvel, like MCU post-credit sequences. Like you're sitting there, you're like, "Oh, where's Captain America's shield, baby? Let's see it," and then just nothing happens at all. He might as well have gone on screen and said, "Hey, fuck yourself," and left. But brilliant.
So I think in conclusion, I think there is perhaps something a little admirable just about how much David Chase hates people.
Yes.
I will say that. Yes.
It's lovely. Like you have to. He teaches you how to become like a masochist, the more he shits on me, the more I want him to make more content. It's weird, but I admire it. That's what an artist does.
Just like the guy who gets his head blown off with a shotgun. My attitude is David Chase. I'd love to eat his shit.
David Chase. If you want to keep making series and movies that will infuriate the fans, I have so many ideas for you. I came up with this one just now. Okay, this is marketed as like Ralphie, Tony, Jackie, like at the time where they robbed Feature on his card game. It's like the 80s, they're on the come up. Like all like very period specific stuff. Like use some cool licensed 80s song in the trailer. But 70% of the movie is about Artie Bucco being a sous chef.
Oh man. Yeah,
I think that wraps it up for the Many Saints of Newark Sopranos story. Gentlemen, any closing thoughts on the film or just Sopranos and life in general?
It was in terms of a movie. I would say solid B+. It was fantastic, and run to the theater immediately and watch it.
Run to your living room.
Yeah. Don't buy a ticket to it. By the way, it took in $5 million at the box office, and I was like,
Big
I was like,
numbers.
oh fuck, this is bad. Anyways, but great movie, fantastic. Vince, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I always wanted to know how Tony got a blue moon in his eye, and now I think I know.
I bet it made David Chase so fucking happy. It made that little box office. I'm happy for him. He was
he had a party to celebrate.
Good for him.
I mean, I don't know if they'll be doing any more of these movies. I really hope they did. I hope they do. And we will be, covering all of them on Pod Yourself a Gun, the world's only Sopranos podcast. That was a plug.